The story begins in 1922. After World War I, a secret organization is formed at a clandestine gathering of authority figures from America, Russia, and China. They call themselves the Philosophers. The Philosophers sought to use their incredible resources and powerful influence to steer world history away from brutal, needless warfare. At the same time, the woman who would be known as the Joy is born as the daughter of one of the original and higher-ranked members of the Philosophers. 1930. With the mysterious death of the Joy's father and the last founding member, the organization begins to spiral out of control. The meaning of the organization was gradually corrupted, and the Philosophers' philosophy was not passed on to posterity. In the following years, the Philosophers' power and reach grew exponentially, becoming the unquestioned forces behind each of their governments. They ran independent political forces, had their own agents, and trained schools of operatives that would undermine seats of powers throughout other governments. The Philosophers' influence extended to countries and organizations involved in every aspect of every war, essentially becoming war itself. The sacrifices of these wars would cause a shift in the times, leading to renewed conflict that in turn triggered countless other wars in an endless cycle. 1936. The woman who would become known as Ava and Big Mama is born in Meridian, Idaho. At some point in her childhood, prior to the start of World War II, she, along with several other children across the world, were taken by the Philosophers and raised in a joint US-Soviet-Chinese facility, receiving spy training at one of the Philosophers' charm schools so she could become a sleeper agent. 1940. During World War II, a secret pact is concluded between the Philosophers. It deals with the construction of a world order after the Axis powers are defeated. To do this, the American, Chinese, and Russian factions of the Philosophers pool their assets in order to secure victory in the war and agree to distribute them after the war. They call this the Philosopher's Legacy. 1941. The Joy is invited to the SAS as a special advisor. Here, she meets David O., who would later be known as Major Zero. 1942. After leaving the SAS, the Joy creates the Cobra Unit. The entire Cobra Unit looks up to her as their mother and leader, and she forms a close relationship with the Sorrow. During World War II, the beginnings of a feud emerged between the different branches of the Philosophers. The Russian Philosophers attempted to sabotage the American Philosophers' Manhattan Project by supplying misinformation about one of the Americans' key scientists, John von Neumann, implicating him as a supposed Nazi spy. The Russians did not wish for America to build their own plutonium bomb, and so hoped this misinformation would incline the American Philosophers to quietly eliminate von Neumann. The Joy is sent to Los Alamos to assassinate John von Neumann. But distracted by her newly discovered pregnancy by the Sorrow, the Joy is wounded and falls into a coma for 3 months. After 6 months, the Joy makes a complete recovery, but after that day, she feels that her failure results in the entire Cold War to come. 1944. During the D-Day landings at Normandy, the Joy and her Cobras are sent on a mission to destroy several V-2 rocket installations. It was there that she gave birth to her and the Sorrow's child on the battlefield, going into labor after she had been shot in the gut. The cesarean section required in the chaos left her with a snake-shaped scar on her torso. She gave birth to a baby boy, though he was soon taken away from her by the philosophers. The boy would later be known by many names, including Adam, Adamska, Shalashaska, and Revolver Ocelot. 1945. In the aftermath of World War II, Boris Volgin, the man who was in charge of laundering the philosophers' funds, monopolizes their assets during the post-war chaos. It will later fall into the hands of his son, Yevgeny Volgin. At this point, the three branches of the philosophers start to split up, which brings even more tension to the Cold War. 1951. The Joy, now named the Boss after her exploits at Normandy, meets a 15-year-old boy named John. She trains him as her disciple, and soon they both develop the basics of CQC. Eventually, John claims that because of his training, part of him belonged to the Boss, and that they were more than just friends, soldiers, or lovers. 1959. The Boss abandons John on a mission without explanation. She was assigned a new top-secret mission by the president involving recruiting Russians who were against the single-party regime in Moscow to steal and sabotage various Soviet space projects, and possibly directly become involved when necessary. However, the CIA disagreed with this and refused to help the Boss, forcing her to utilize the philosopher's spy channels for the first time to accomplish it. She managed to succeed in placing a sleeper agent to recruit them, and the CIA took over, namely to take all the credit. But the Boss didn't mind. However, late into the year, the Boss discovered some discrepancies relating to the Soviet blueprints that their sleeper agent was sending, namely in regards to the Sputnik 5, where there was an ejection pod. She tried to report her findings to the CIA and get them to investigate, but they ignored her, thinking she wanted to regain her gold glory. She ended up infiltrating the Soviet Union without any official support and infiltrated the OKB-1 research facility. She discovered not only that her sleeper agent had defected to the Soviet Union, but also the reason he did so was because the CIA was pocketing a large amount of his paycheck, and that the ejection pod on the Sputnik 5 was actually an ejection seat for human personnel to utilize to survive re-entry. She reported her findings to NASA, which resulted in the CIA blaming the Boss on everything that went wrong to cover up their failures to the recently inaugurated President Kennedy. 1960. Two NSA codebreakers, Adam and Ava, defect to the Soviet Union. Adam, the Boss's son, would later serve as the commander of the Soviet GRU while secretly operating as a spy for both the KGB and the CIA. 1961. The Boss was chosen for participation in the Mercury project and met Dr. Strangelove, who was assigned to Mercury as a key staff member. She was sent to space on a mission to acquire data on how well the human body could cope in such conditions, but during which radiation was an inevitability. She officially became the first American in space, and seeing the Earth from above sparked her dream of uniting the world as one. Unfortunately, as she returned to Earth from her flight, the addition of a window caused her re-entry capsule to veer off course and crash-landed into the ocean. The Boss was thrown from the capsule and severely burned by both the cosmic radiation and the heat of re-entry. Miraculously, the Boss did survive, and sent her into a deep coma for 6 months. The military covered up the accident by claiming that the Boss took part in the CIA's botched Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba. The Pentagon begins to feel threatened by the CIA's growing influence in the U.S. military affairs. 1962. The Boss recovered, but the current administration resented the fact that the Russians had a widely publicized successful spaceflight, while the Boss's injuries and crash landing forced the United States to cover up their own experimental spaceflight, despite the fact that she was in space first. The boss had used philosopher contacts outside of Russia to place her spy in 1959. But once Soviet philosophers discovered the spy, no branch of the philosophers was willing to help her. The Soviets decided to send in the Tsaro, the boss's former lover who had returned to the Soviet Union after the disbandment of the Cobra unit. Unaware that the boss was involved, the Tsaro successfully turned the spy into a double agent. Later in 1962, she was sent on a mission to eliminate her sleeper agent who betrayed her in the United States by intentionally feeding them erroneous data about Soviet rocket technology. Her second objective on a mission was to eliminate the Tsaro. Technically, the objective was that only one of them was allowed to live. The philosophers forced them to participate in this task by threatening to kill their child if they both survived. The boss and the Tsaro met on top of a bridge in Selinoyarsk and discussed what they should do. Ultimately, they agreed that the Tsaro should be the one to die. Reluctantly, the boss shot him through the left eye. In late 1962, the former SAS associate of the boss, David O., reached out to her and invited her to form a new CIA unit with him, called Fox. 1964. The CIA begins to fear the boss's overwhelming charisma, so they made plans to eliminate her. In July, the boss, who still remained in contact with the U.S. homeland, was ordered to take part in a major operation to recover the philosopher's legacy. This mission was called the Virtuous Mission. In order to acquire the legacy, the boss had to trade her way into GRU Colonel Yevgeny Volgin's ranks, utilizing the philosopher's spy network. She was contacted by Volgin with the suggestion of defection, as well as learning the location of Soviet rocket scientist Nikolai Sokolov and the details of a secret nuclear weapon he had been developing. A month later, the boss participated in the Virtuous Mission, where she was reunited with John. She served as part of the mission control, along with Major Zero, SIGINT, and Paramedic. The boss was provided with 2 portable nuclear warheads and launcher, with the intention of handing them over to Colonel Volgin and gaining his trust. The boss also helped Volgin recover Sokolov before he could escape the Soviet Union with John. Volgin used one of the nukes to destroy Sokolov's design bureau, OKB-754. The destruction of the bureau in a nuclear explosion called for the boss's mission to be greatly expanded and revised. She would have to prove the innocence of the United States in a mission known as Operation Snake Eater. Continuing to act as a traitor to America, the boss would allow herself to be assassinated by her beloved protege John, then an operative of Fox codenamed Naked Snake. With the United States' reputation on the line and the 2 nations on the verge of World War III, Snake was sent into the Soviet Union in order to eliminate the boss and her Cobra unit and to rescue Nikolai Sokolov. Additionally, he was tasked with eliminating Volgin and the threat exposed by the nuclear-armed Shagohod. In exchange for America's cooperation in eliminating the boss and Volgin, the KGB also supplied the Fox unit with contact with Adam and Ava, the 2 NSA agents who had defected to the Soviet Union in 1960. Specifically, Adam had infiltrated the ranks of GRU and would also supply Snake with an escape route as soon as the mission was completed. But Adam, aka GRU Major Ocelot, being a triple agent, was ordered by the CIA to aid Naked Snake in Operation Snake Eater, while also retrieving the Philosopher's legacy for the American branch of the Philosophers. However, before Ocelot could meet up with Snake, a Chinese spy posing as the real Ava pretended to help Snake in his mission while secretly plotting to take the Philosopher's legacy herself for the Philosophers in China. Ocelot decided to keep his identity as Adam a secret and aided Snake covertly. Throughout the mission, Ocelot and Snake shared a mutual rivalry and fought on several occasions. Understanding that she had to give her life and even eternally sacrifice her reputation for her country in order to save the world from nuclear war, the boss subtly helped Snake with his mission, while at the same time maintaining Vulcan's trust. One by one, Snake killed off the remaining Cobra unit members, becoming stronger and stronger after each encounter. Eventually, the boss meets Snake in a field of white flowers. There, she reminded him of his duty as a soldier prior to engaging him in a final duel. She also described to him the perceived portrayal of the Cuban exiles in the Bay of Pigs invasion, an example of the US government's questionable policies, concealing her true role in the events of the Mercury Project by claiming to have been there. The boss fought Snake with the intent to kill him, but he had gained much experience from his mission. She attacked with her assault rifle, the Patriot, but Snake evaded her attacks while engaging her in CQC, now equaling her skill. Though her white sneaking suit aided in her camouflage among the Easter lilies, she eventually collapsed from Snake's ongoing attacks. After falling at the hands of her former disciple, the boss passed the microfilm containing the philosopher's legacy to him. Snake then shot her with her own weapon. Prior to her death, the boss had explained part of the truth of her mission to Ava, who had later informed Snake of this. She had also made Ava and Gru Major Ocelot promise not to kill Snake, nor aid in killing him. In the end, she had left everything in the hands of Snake. After saving the world, President Johnson awarded Snake the title of Big Boss. He reluctantly shook his hand and turned away. The CIA director offered his hand, but Big Boss left, devastated. He even refused to speak or shake hands with Major Zero and his crew. Visiting Arlington National Cemetery, Big Boss laid flowers on the boss's grave alongside her gun, the Patriot. The grave reads, "In memory of a patriot who saved the world." Big Boss stood, saluted with tears rolling down his face. The boss's debriefing would endure only in his heart and in his memory of her. In America, the boss would be seen as a despicable traitor, and in the Soviet Union, she would be seen as a monster who unleashed a nuclear catastrophe. She would go down in official history as a war criminal. 1966. Now a wandering mercenary in Mozambique, Big Boss becomes acquainted with a boy calling himself Frank Yeager. Known for his cruel war tactics, the boy would trick enemies into letting their guard down by acting with the frankness of a young boy, before killing them with the ruthlessness of a hunter. Big Boss placed the young boy into a rehabilitation facility, believing that he would be safe. But while at the rehab center, Yeager was taken by the CIA and used as a test subject in the Perfect Soldier project. The project turned the boy into a more efficient soldier, capable of killing his targets without remorse. However, it was at a cost. When he was not fighting, he was kept in a fluid-filled sensory deprivation tank, which would reset his memories and suppress his emotions. This intense treatment would enhance his senses and reflexes, allowing him to deflect bullets and become incredibly agile. Because Yeager was the only surviving test subject of the project, he was deemed a lost number and was given the code name Null. The Perfect Soldier project was accompanied by the Successor project. Its goal was to create the ultimate battlefield commander to take charge of the perfect soldier. A man named Gene is chosen for the successor project. The model they choose for the project is the Boss. 1970, members of the Fox unit, now headed by the man named Gene, and under the influences of the CIA, start a revolt and take over the Soviet IRBM facility on the San Jeronimo Peninsula, as well as hijacking a new secret weapon during transport. Major Zero is arrested by the Pentagon under charge of treason. Big Boss is also charged with treason for spearheading the revolt and is captured by members of Fox, where he meets Roy Campbell for the first time. Together, the pair sets out to take down the Fox unit. In battle, Big Boss encounters Frank Yeager once again, now a member of Fox. Big Boss and Roy Campbell meet Elisa for the first time, and they discover the plans for a new weapon called Metal Gear. Big Boss successfully destroys Metal Gear Raxa with the help of Nikolai Sokolov, who comes out of hiding. The Fox unit is wiped out, and Jean, leader of Fox, fatally wounds Elisa. With her last words, Elisa foresees that one of Big Boss's sons will bring the world to ruin, while the other will save the world. Big Boss proceeds to kill Jean, who gives him the funds he has amassed for Army's Heaven. The United States accumulates the remainder of the Philosopher's legacy thanks to Ocelot, and Major Zero forms the Patriots, dedicated to reuniting the world in honor of the Boss's final wishes. Ocelot joins the unit, but stays in the Soviet Union as an informant. Sigint, Paramedic, and Big Boss make up the rest of the organization. Major Zero proceeds to turn Big Boss into an idol and hero, to lead the world as a messiah-like figure. 1971. The L'Enfance Terrible project commences. Zero has Paramedic, now calling herself Dr. Clark, secretly clone Big Boss in order to preserve the Patriots icon. Big Boss begins to become disillusioned with the Patriots. 1972. Liquid Snake and Solid Snake are born as a product of L'Enfance Terrible. Dr. Clark's Japanese assistant is the egg donor for the two somatic cell clones, while Ava serves as the surrogate mother. Sometime later, the project successfully produces another clone, Solidus Snake. Big Boss leaves the Patriots after learning of L'Enfance Terrible, and creates the Militaires Sans Frontières. Ava and Ocelot also begin to lose faith in Zero as well. 1974. The Militaires Sans Frontières are asked by Paz Ortega Andrade and Ramon Galvez Mina of the Costa Rican University for Peace to repel rogue CIA forces operating in Costa Rica. Big Boss and his partner Kazuhira Miller are wary of their intentions until Galvez gives Big Boss a cassette tape with a recently recorded audio clip of the Boss. Entering Costa Rica, MSF joins forces with the local Sandinistas, led by Amanda Libre and her 12-year-old brother Chico. MSF begins operations against the occupying force, revealed to be Peace Sentinel, a CIA group led by a man named Hot Coldman. MSF destroys a mysterious mobile weapon with the help of its developer, Huey Emmerich, who subsequently joins MSF. They eventually infiltrate a hidden AI laboratory headed by Dr. Strangelove, where Big Boss first encounters the Boss AI. The AI was created by Strangelove to fulfill the needs of an unmanned nuclear launch system that could determine suitable targets for retaliation in the event of a nuclear attack on the United States. Strangelove deduced that the legendary US soldier, the Boss, would be an ideal model on which to base the AI, as she could think of no other person that met the required standards. MSF tracks down the Peace Walker AI weapon to a testing facility. After infiltrating the base, Big Boss is captured and tortured, but later escapes captivity. Afterwards, Peace Walker is activated, and Big Boss battles its bipedal form, successfully damaging it. Peace Walker makes preparations to destroy MSF's mother base with a nuclear strike from a US missile base in Nicaragua. Galvez, now known to be a KGB agent named Vladimir Zadornov, changes Peace Walker's target to Cuba and fatally wounds Peace Sentinel leader Hot Coldman. The Sandinistas and MSF capture and detain Zadornov. On his deathbed, Coldman arms Peace Walker for launch, which also transmits false trajectory data to NORAD and the National Military Command Chain. Peace Walker is heavily damaged by MSF, which then mysteriously destroys itself in order to stop the false data transmission. After Coldman's death, Snake brings on Strangelove to begin working on their own AI weapon, called Metal Gear Zeke, alongside Huey. The mech was later armed with Peace Walker's nuclear warhead in order to provide a nuclear deterrent for the expanded mother base. Zadornov also escaped his cell several times, forcing the MSF to find and recapture him. On the last time, Snake found him at the shooting range and killed him in self-defense after Zadornov tried to gun him down. Dying, Zadornov then launched his prosthetic hand at Snake, revealed to be a rocket-powered projectile, after mentioning that his work was done. Snake was suspicious because Zadornov's numerous escapes pointed to an inside job. Kaz alerted him about Zeke suddenly moving out of its hangar and rising to the surface of Mother Base. Snake arrived on Mother Base's deck to discover that Paz was manually operating the Zeke unit. Miller was unable to shut it down remotely, with Paz revealing that she had made modifications to Zeke while Zadornov had diverted their attention. She then announced that she was taking it back to their leaders, a group she called Cypher, and that her real name was Pacifica Ocean. Her portrayal as an ambassador of peace had simply been an elaborate ruse, and that the real Peace Walker project would soon be fulfilled. Paz accused Snake of having taken the wrong path, regarding his parting ways with his former Fox commander and friend Zero 2 years earlier. The two men had been unable to come to terms with their sorrow over the boss's death, so they had each decided to carry on the will of their hero. However, they could not agree what that will was, so they had split up and become bitter enemies. With the Cold War nearing an end, the age of electronic intelligence would come to the fore, and Cypher planned to unite the various agencies of the intelligence community under a single will. Cypher would then gather information with the intent of guiding the world and its people's minds, while the populace remained blissfully unaware. Ultimate control would provide the illusion of peace, and a world without borders would arise, accomplishing what the boss had apparently long sought for. By obeying Cypher, the MSF would act as a deterring agent against forces that would threaten the development of this new world order, distracting the old order's eyes with Snake's charisma and military prowess. Reassuring Snake that he would be allowed to retain control of MSF and Zeke, Paz beckoned for him to accept Cypher's offer. Snake denied her accusation that he was afraid to abandon his life calling, as the boss had supposedly done, and refused the proposal. Rescinding the offer, Paz then sought to launch a nuclear strike on the US East Coast, then framed the MSF as an extremist cult. Snake took on and destroyed Zeke, but before it was fully destroyed, Paz warned of Snake becoming an international criminal in the decades ahead. Zeke then exploded, and Paz was thrown by the force of the explosion into the ocean. Big Boss could only express remorse at having to fight Paz. The remains of Zeke were later salvaged, with Strangelove remarking that the AI has a backup copy. A few hours after the destruction of Zeke, Kaz admitted learning of Paz's real identity and purpose well beforehand, and that Cypher was actually Major Zero, who perpetrated the whole plot and indirectly triggered MSF's expansion. Although Snake was angry at him, Kaz explained that the MSF set a new trend in military operations with their actions in Costa Rica, and predicted that the end of the Cold War would give rise to regional conflicts, where the MSF would thrive. Since the MSF's battle capabilities disrupted the global military balance of power, Snake warned that certain forces would definitely try to take them down, hence their need to continue operating outside of society. In a later address over a loudspeaker, Snake told his troops that their group would serve under anyone, regardless of nations and ideology, and they would soon build a nation they would call their own, called Outer Heaven. (1975) MSF received a letter from the IAEA requesting that they inspect Mother Base. Big Boss and Kaz both realized that the IAEA had been manipulated by Cypher, and the real reason was to locate Metal Gear Zeke's nuclear warhead as revenge for foiling their plan. Although they attempted to refuse the inspection, Dr. Huey Emmerich had secretly sent a letter indicating that they changed their minds. Forced into the situation, Big Boss and Miller rushed to prepare for the inspections. This included sending all civilians save for Huey back to their home countries, as well as sending all their armored vehicles, except for Zeke, to the shore alongside any rebellious personnel for mandatory R&R. Later, Miller revealed that, thanks to both intercepted reports from Cypher as well as Amanda, they discovered that Paz was still alive. Miller suggested that they retrieve her in order to get information on Cypher's true nature, as she was their sole viable link. However, because of the inspection, MSF was forced to put it off until afterwards, and hoped to send Chico to meet with his sister to distract him, as word had already spread about her survival. Always having a crush on Paz, he then attempted to rescue her, but ended up being caught when he found a prisoner who resembled Paz. Miller later discovered this from both Amanda and Big Boss and ordered for the intel team stationed at Cuba to find Chico. Chico was imprisoned at Camp Omega, where he had bolts installed into his Achilles tendon. A few days later, during a routine torture session of Paz, Chico was taken with a mysterious group called XOF to the admin building where he met the group's leader, Skullface. Skullface informed Chico that there was no hope for escape unless he was to submit to interrogation regarding Mother Base defenses. After several interrogations, including beatings, watching Paz get stripped, raped, and beaten, and then forced Chico to have sex with Paz while Skullface watched, Chico, broken from the torture, relayed everything he knew about Mother Base, including confirmation about Zeke's existence. He then was locked back up and then forced to torture Paz. Skullface, knowing Big Boss and MSF are most likely going to try to find Chico and possibly Paz, then had Chico send an SOS signal explaining where he and Paz were. True to Skullface's predictions, Big Boss and Miller realized it was most likely a trap, but were left with no options but to rescue Chico and Paz. After preparations, Big Boss then departed for the coastline of Cuba, with the only backup being a soul extraction chopper to arrive once he had rescued Chico and Paz. Skullface, however, still had unfinished business with Paz. He revealed that Paz was the only Cypher agent who actually met Zero face to face, and as such she knew his location, and he wanted her to divulge his location to him, as he intended to liberate himself from Cypher. After getting his location after implying that this might help Big Boss, Skullface also put a bomb in Paz's stomach, with another bomb inside an undisclosed part of her body, anticipating the likelihood that Big Boss would attempt to rescue her. 2 days later, Skullface paid a final visit to Chico's cell and gave him back his Walkman. After telling Chico that Paz didn't suffer long, he told Chico to give his regards to Big Boss when he arrives. After masking the chopper's XOF logo with a strange light, he then commented that the Trojan horse was a go, and he had the group depart. He then ordered for all the XOF personnel to dispose of their XOF patches. Big Boss then arrived to Camp Omega after noticing its location on the iDroid. After knocking out the guards near the area, he then found Chico in his cage, although Chico ended up panicking at the sight of him, forcing Big Boss to put him in a sleeper hold due to it otherwise drawing the guards to him. He then took him to the extraction site. Thanks to Chico's Walkman, Big Boss managed to deduce Paz's location from the tape sounds, tracing her to the basement of the admin building of the base. He then found her strung up to the boiler room. After making sure she was alive, he then cut her loose and took her with him. He then returned to the extraction site with the base now searching for the missing Paz, and managed to load Chico and Paz onto the chopper and left. On their way back to the base, Chico discovered Paz had a scar on her gut and warned Big Boss. Upon seeing the scar, Big Boss ordered for a medic to come to her. Realizing from the scar that she was most likely rigged with a bomb by her captors, they were forced to operate on Paz immediately, not having any time for anesthetics. During the surgery, Huey informed Big Boss that the inspection was a success, and they had not found Zeke. Eventually, they found the bomb, which allowed them to remove and dispose of it. However, the chopper lost contact with Mother Base, with Big Boss soon discovering why. It was under attack by the XOF forces. He then returned to one of the struts and aided Miller and the others in escaping. However, the strut was about to collapse due to C4 being placed on the struts. They then rushed to evacuate with only Big Boss, Miller, and a single MSF soldier able to escape. Retreating from the crumbling Mother Base, Miller interrogated Paz out of anger at the losses MSF had suffered when Paz revealed that she had been implanted with a second bomb, and jumped out of the chopper to save them. Unfortunately, she jumped out too late as the explosion caused it to careen into a pursuing XOF helicopter. 9 years later, Big Boss awakens from a coma inside of a strange hospital.
What happened to the woman? The woman? We gave her a light. She took the short way down. Who are you? Who am I? I've been watching over you for 9 years. You can call me Ishmael. What the hell is going on? Well, the good news is you're in the land of the living. Bad news? The world wants you dead. On your feet, soldier. The whole place is coming down. Need a little pick-me-up? Okay. Here. Nothing like a little digoxin to get you back in the game. Come on! Drug's not working? We're getting out of here. Move it. Let's take the stairs. Better take the elevator. Something's coming. The emergency stairs, come on! This way, hurry.